So what even is a Canet Gun? A Canet Gun was the sort of centerpiece of this whole jeune école, or young school philosophy, that was popular back in the late 19th century, in that it was a way for small countries with less developed industries to be competitive navally against big, great powers like England or the US or Germany. So the idea was that you would take a small boat and stick the biggest fucking gun you have on it, right in the middle of it, and use that to kill battleships. It was essentially the 19th century equivalent of a modern torpedo boat or a missile boat. It's basically a small boat with a disproportionately large armament attached on it, allowing it to, in theory, be competitive against and destroy large capital ships. Back in the day, that would be pre-dreadnought battleships. So the idea was that, now of course you couldn't use these out in the open ocean, but as long as you stayed within, I suppose, green waters or brown waters, rivers or your coastal waters, these torpedo boats, cruisers would come out with these giant fucking guns and just blast away at enemy battleships. Now of course, a 300mm shell doesn't care if it's launched from a proper battleship or if it's launched from a shitty fucking fishing boat. It has its same killing power nonetheless. So the idea was that all you needed to have was the industry or the funds to get yourself a medium-sized cruiser and a giant fucking gun, and you would take those and you put them together, and that would let you be at least defensively competitive against any great power that wanted to take your shit. Because so long as you remain, again, within the sort of area where a cruiser could operate, you would have some way of piercing the armor on a proper battleship. And that this worked for countries, in theory again, that didn't have the industry or the means and the funds to get yourself or to get themselves a proper real battleship. Now of course there's a couple of reasons why this is fucking stupid. So the first reason is that unlike a torpedo or a missile, or like a modern missile, guns have recoil. And when you take a tiny fucking narrow, and more importantly narrow, right? One of the most stable gun platforms in naval history was the Japanese Yamato, and the reason it was so stable was because it was so fucking thick with like 4 Cs. It was wide, and so you could shoot several tons of metal to one side of the ship, fire a broadside, and it wouldn't affect the stability of the ship because the ship was so wide relative to its length and its depth, meaning that you could take some impact and still be stable. But if you take a cruiser, which is designed for long range, or like relatively long range and high speeds, you have this narrow hull form, meaning that if you take the recoil of sending several hundred kilograms of metal in one direction and you push against that narrow hull form sideways, then you fucking tip the ship over and it fucking sinks and it doesn't work as a ship. And so that was one of the main issues with the Canet Guns on the Japanese armored cruisers, the Matsushima class, that you could really only fire it at a certain angle. Also, it was put on the fucking back, so you couldn't like chase with it. Although that's probably for the better, because if you try to chase with it, you would probably end up destroying your bridge, which has happened before. That was the first issue. The second issue was that this was back in the 19th century, back when they didn't have ubiquitous electricity and ubiquitous machinery. Meaning that to reload the gun, because after you fire it, you gotta put a new shell into the gun, it would take a long fucking time. It'd take like an hour and a half, like half an hour, because you would have to raise the shell from the core of the ship, from the depths of the ship where it was armored, up to where the gun was, or up to the turret, and then load that big ass fucking shell into the breech, and that took time. Now, of course, that's fine if you're shelling a fort, or a city, or a harbor, or a I don't know, a bunch of foxholes, or a division, or a trench, or something that doesn't fucking move, right? But when you're in the open ocean, or not when you're in coastal waters, and you're shooting against the enemy fleet, fucking newsflash, ships move. And so if you take a long time to reload your gun, you have to recalculate your entire firing solution because you don't know how fast they're going or how far they are. Now, of course, you could use smaller guns on your ship to help you with that, of course. The only issue is that obviously the fucking big gun goes farther than the small guns. And so if you're, because one of the big advantages of having a bigger gun is that it goes farther and kills people that are far away. And so if you want to hit a battle line that's far away enough that your small guns can't reach them, and all you have is the Canet Gun. That sounds great until the first time that you shoot and you miss and you have to recalculate your firing solution. So the first time you miss, that's fine, right? On any normal ship, you would use the splash. You see the shell land, and the splash is either behind or in front or to one side of the enemy fleet, and you use that to help you fix your firing solution. But that doesn't fucking work when the fleet has half an hour to move to a completely different place, away from your fleet or toward your fleet, who the fuck knows, and you have to do all that from scratch, right? Now, of course, this does sort of reinforce the idea that it was meant to be used at short ranges. The issue is that at short ranges, the enemy has like 4 times as many guns as you, and they're shooting at you. You have one shot every fucking half an hour, and you can't hit anything. Now, of course, if you do hit something, then you have a ship killer right there. But the odds of you hitting the ship in the first place and then hitting vital machinery or ammunition is low. And the third issue is that, of course, it's inherently a stopgap measure. The idea is that you would use it as a sort of intermediary between a brown or green water navy and a real a navy, like worthy of a great power. As soon as Japan got their hands on real battleships, funny enough from the Chinese, that they used the Canet Gun to take, they immediately binned the Canet Guns, and they took on like the actual ironclads, because there isn't any point in having these for a long time, because you can only use them in a limited range of territory, and even if you do use them, they're not all that combat effective. So to recap, 3 issues. 1. Recoil. 2. Fire rate. And 3. Temporary as fuck. And although this idea of asymmetrical warfare and disproportionate damage has been around for a long time, the Canet Gun was definitely not the way to go. And this also speaks to all these sort of wonder weapons that involves having one single disproportionately large weapon or heavily armored. Just having one thing is a bad thing, right? First of all, having one thing sucks, right? Because if you lose that one thing, yeah, if the Canet Gun goes off, the shell goes off in the gun and it disables it, then you're out your entire arsenal of weaponry. Just the fact that one gun is your entire main armament is a bad idea. And it speaks about these sort of wonder weapons that revolve around just one weapon being scientifically or technically or just overall superior to the rest of the enemy. It doesn't matter if your one gun is better if the enemy has fucking like 20 guns and they're all shooting at you and your one gun was disabled because somebody, I don't know, pushed the wrong button. So in essence, the thing that killed the Canet Gun is the same thing that kills most single-shot wonder weapons or one-show horses or one-horse shows. And it's that it's limited in use and you can't rely on it.